northern Ethiopia, one of the hottest, lowest, most geologically active places on Earth. A human footprint was discovered here in hardened volcanic ash, dated to approximately 3.7 million years ago, made by Australopithecus afarensis. The arch, the heel, the five-toed impression, unmistakably the foot of an ancestor. Not an ape, an ancestor. Two individuals walking together 3.7 million years ago, leaving exactly the kind of footprint you'd leave. The species that includes Lucy, the most famous fossil in human history. The footprint is barefoot, unmistakably human in form. For 3.7 million years, the human foot walked unprotected. The bare human foot is extraordinarily sophisticated. It has 26 bones, 33 joints, over 100 muscles and tendons. It evolved for 3.7 million years without shoes. Then it started changing. Then, roughly 40,000 years ago, something changed. The smallest toes began to weaken. The bones became thinner. The muscles began to atrophy. The foot was changing shape. Only makes sense if something had taken over the work those toes evolved to do. Modern feet show the consequences of shoes, bunions, hammer toes, plantar fasciitis, all rare in habitually barefoot populations. The shoe reshaped the foot. It also reshaped the diseases the foot suffers from. The trade-off runs both ways. The fossil record of the human foot is the fossil record of the shoe. This is the history of shoes. The oldest known shoes were found in a cave in Oregon. Sagebrush sandals woven from plant fiber. 9,000 years old. The Fort Rock sandal weave is technically accomplished. Not the first sandals, just the oldest we found. The sandal was independently invented on multiple continents. Every civilization that needed one found one. But the fossil evidence of toe weakening pushes shoe use back to 40,000 years before that. We don't have the shoes from 40,000 years ago. Organic materials don't survive that long. We have their shadow. The impression shoes left on human bone. Saifi, the Iceman, was wearing shoes when he died 5,300 years ago in the Alps. In the Alpine Pass where Suvansi died, barefoot meant death in hours. The shoe was the margin. 5,000 years of refinement. The problem is identical. The materials are different. Bearskin sole, deer hide upper, bark string netting, hay stuffed inside for insulation. Modern footwear engineers analyzed Thitzi's shoes and concluded the construction principles are fundamentally sound. Every civilization that encountered cold, rough ground, or contaminated soil invented footwear independently. In the Arctic, sealskin boots. In the Amazon, plant fiber sandals. In the Alps, hay-stuffed hide. Same problem, local solution. But Thitzi's shoes were functional survival technology. The history of shoes is not just survival. In ancient Egypt, shoes were a privilege of status. Most Egyptians went barefoot. The pharaoh wore sandals. When the pharaoh walked on ceremonial ground, a sandal bearer carried a spare pair. Images show defeated enemies crawling barefoot at the sandaled pharaoh's feet. Barefoot equals defeated. The sandal appeared in Egyptian religious texts, tomb art, and official protocol. A shoe made sacred. The pharaoh's sandals were gold. The craftsman's were papyrus. The slave's was the ground. Egyptian hieroglyphs used a sandal strap as part of the pharaoh's name, cartouche. The sandal encoded royalty. In ancient Rome, sandals were the standard footwear of the free citizen. Slaves went barefoot. Roman senators wore specific sandals that identified their rank. Higher rank, more elaborate shoe. Soldiers wore the caliga, a heavy studded sandal designed for long marches. The hobnailed sole of the Roman soldier's sandal wore out the roads of the empire as it marched them. Every Roman legion carried cobblers. Shoes required maintenance. Barefoot soldiers couldn't march. Caligatus, sandaled, was the Latin word for soldier. The Emperor Caligula's name means little boot, a nickname given by legionaries who found a small boy in uniform. The medical consequences of going barefoot in the ancient world were severe. The geography of soil-transmitted parasites is the geography of barefoot poverty. Hookworm alone reduces cognitive test scores by 14% and school attendance by 3 weeks per year. Ground-dwelling parasites, hookworm, roundworm, threadworm, enter the body through the soles of bare feet. Chronic anemia, stunted growth, cognitive impairment, reduced immune function, all from bare feet. The shoe was not just a comfort technology, it was a health intervention. The wealthy just didn't know it. The link between bare feet and disease wasn't understood until the 20th century, but the link between bare feet and low status had been understood for 5,000 years before that. The wealthy were protected from parasites not because they understood it, but because their shoes did the work. Medieval Europe formalized the shoe as status technology in increasingly elaborate ways. The poulain, the extraordinarily long-toed shoe, reached lengths of up to 24 inches, so long that they had to be tied to the knee to prevent tripping. Physically impossible to work in. That was the point. A man who could afford poulains was a man who did not work. The length of the toe was the length of the freedom from labor. The cobbler who made the poulain wore plain shoes. The lord who wore it contributed nothing to its making. The poulain was eventually regulated by sumptuary laws governing who was allowed to wear what. Knights longer than merchants, merchants longer than craftsmen, craftsmen longer than laborers. By the way, this is the last episode of this series for now. We've covered sewers, water, paper, salt, fire, and bread. Subscribe for more. Back to the story. In colonial America, shoes were among the most valuable portable possessions a person could own. Indentured servants were sometimes promised shoes at the end of their contract, part of their freedom dues. Enslaved people in the American South went barefoot as a matter of enforced policy. Frederick Douglass wrote about receiving his first pair of shoes as a transformative experience, not because his feet had been cold, though they had been, because the shoe was a symbol of humanity. Abolitionists explicitly documented the barefoot condition of enslaved people as evidence of slavery's dehumanization. The first act of freedom for many was the first pair of shoes. The shoe as citizenship. The Industrial Revolution democratized shoes almost accidentally. The sewing machine of 1846 was almost immediately applied to shoe manufacturing. The Mackay machine, one operator, 100 pairs, per Dalton Y. A cobbler previously needed a full day for one pair. Within a generation, factory-made shoes were cheap enough for industrial workers to own multiple pairs. Most shoes worn in wealthy countries are made by workers who cannot afford the shoes they make. Made for $3, sold for $150. The economics of global footwear haven't changed much. Today, the global footwear market is worth approximately $400 billion. Nike alone produces 800 million pairs of shoes per year, and in low-income countries, an estimated 300 million children go to school barefoot, exposed to the soil-transmitted parasites that their wealthier counterparts are protected from by the $2 rubber sandal they can't afford. Organizations that distribute shoes to barefoot children in endemic areas see hookworm reinfection drop by 80% within months. The $2 rubber sandal is among the most cost-effective health interventions in global medicine. The $2 sandal is a health intervention. In a hookworm environment, it protects a child's development. The foot that walked unprotected for 3.7 million years still walks unprotected in the places left behind. The shoe didn't solve barefoot poverty. It solved the problem for those who could already afford solutions. Shoes separated the living from the dead, not because footwear prevents death, though sometimes it does. They separated the living from the dead because the people who could afford shoes lived longer, healthier lives. The cobbler is one of the oldest professional roles in history. Every army and every city needed one. Every civilization developed its own answer. The sandal, the boot, the moccasin, the clog, the zori. One problem, 100 solutions, all of them right for the ground they were made for. 300 million children making the same barefoot walk to school every morning. For that child, the shoe is not fashion. It is the margin between developing normally and not. We now design shoes with computational fluid dynamics. Whatsie would find the result unrecognizable. The problem is identical. Outsole, midsole, upper, insole. 4 layers solving the same problem as 1 layer of bare skin. We run marathons in shoes designed by biomechanical engineers. A Fitzy would have recognized the purpose. The same foot, 3.7 million years. The same contact with the same ground. The same need. The shoe that separates the living from the dead is still not on every foot that needs it. The people without shoes died of diseases that never touched the shod. History is everywhere.